Before we build our pivot table, let's check out how many rows and columns we have. Let's select all of our columns and check the status bar. We've got 9 columns. Select all of our rows and we have 49 rows. We just need to click anywhere in our data, then over to the Insert tab, and we want to insert a pivot table. Excel automatically detects our table range and prefixes it with our worksheet name. This all looks good, folks. Let's click OK and build our pivot table on its own worksheet. I always like to rename the worksheet. And I'm also going to move the worksheet after our country sheet. By default, our pivot table is blank. And when we start building it, it will appear in this left-hand area over here. And in order to build the thing, we will use the pivot table fields on the right-hand side. And we can see 9 fields listed here, which correspond to the 9 columns in our data. And down the bottom, we have 4 panels, which is where we will carry out our pivots. Before we do anything else, let's click this little down arrow and move this panel a little bit closer to our data. For our first scenario, we just want to know how many countries we have in each continent. Let's tick the continent field. And because it's a text field, Excel will add it as a row in our pivot table. Let's click the country field. And don't let anybody tell you any different. Basic pivot tables are about ticking and unticking and dragging the fields around these panels. This table is already looking fantastic, but it's still not telling us how many countries per continent. We'll need to use the values area. Notice this little auto sum icon? Anything we drag into this area will be calculated by the pivot table. Depending on the type of data, the pivot table can perform a sum, a count. If we want Excel to calculate the number of countries, we should drag it into the values area. And the country field contains text rather than numerical data, so Excel definitely can't do a sum, so it will simply perform a count. And bam, there's our 49 records with a count per continent. Let's pivot the table by dragging the continent field as a column. I think it looks better listed as a row, so let's drag it back. We have 7 countries in North America. Let's see what happens when we insert a new record. Come back to our pivot table and it hasn't updated. We need to tell the pivot table that new records have been added to our data. Up to the Analyze tab, and we need to change the data source. We only added 1 new record, so our last row is now row 51. And we see that our total for North America has now updated. And if you want to know more about pivot tables, check out the next video in our series. Until then, we are done.